London, England. April 1812. Zephyra Osborne clutched her worn leather journal to her chest as she stood at the edge of Hampton Palace Gardens. A light breeze played with the loose strands of chestnut hair that had escaped her simple cap. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns, illuminating the dew that still clung to the grass. She glanced down at her plain muslin dress, suddenly conscious of its modest appearance compared to the grandeur that surrounded her. "You're being ridiculous," she muttered to herself. "They are merely plants, not peers of the realm." As the daughter of the recently appointed royal gardener, Zephyra had permission to sketch the botanical specimens for her father's records. Still, she felt like an intruder in this hallowed space where only the nobility typically strolled. Taking a deep breath, she followed the gravel path deeper into the gardens, her eyes widening at the splendor of spring flowers blooming in carefully arranged beds. Tall hedges formed a natural maze, offering secluded corners and hidden alcoves that beckoned exploration. Finding a quiet spot near a fountain adorned with marble nymphs, Zephyra settled onto a stone bench and opened her journal. With practiced strokes, she began sketching a particularly vibrant cluster of bluebells. So absorbed was she in capturing the delicate curve of each stem that she failed to notice the approach of footsteps until a shadow fell across her page. "Those are quite good," came a deep voice from above her. Zephyra startled, nearly dropping her pencil as she scrambled to her feet, journal clutched protectively to her chest. She found herself staring up at a tall gentleman dressed in a perfectly tailored blue coat, his cravat arranged in a complicated style that spoke of a valet's expert touch. "Your Highness," she gasped, dropping into a wobbly curtsy when she recognized Prince Henry Halliwell, second son of the king. "Forgive me, I did not realize, please," he interrupted, raising a hand. "There's no need for such formality when I've clearly intruded upon your solitude." His eyes, a striking shade of green that reminded Zephyra of the new spring leaves, crinkled slightly at the corners. "I merely wish to compliment your artwork." Zephyra felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You are most kind, Your Highness, but these are merely botanical sketches for my father's records. He is the new head gardener." "Ah, Mr. Osborne. I've heard excellent things about his work at Kew." The prince gestured to the bench. "May I join you? Or would you prefer I leave you to your sketching?" Zephyra's mind raced. Refusing a prince seemed unthinkable, yet her father had warned her to maintain a respectable distance from the royal family. "I would never presume to refuse Your Highness anything," she said carefully. Prince Henry laughed, the sound unexpectedly warm and genuine. "That wasn't an order, Miss Osborne. It was a question." "Then yes, you may join me," she replied, surprised by her own boldness. "Though I cannot imagine why you would wish to." The prince settled onto the bench beside her, maintaining a proper distance. "Perhaps I tire of people who never ask questions and only give the answers they believe I wish to hear." Zephyra studied him from the corner of her eye. Up close, she could see the shadows beneath his eyes and the slight strain around his mouth despite his pleasant expression. The newspapers often called him the solitary prince, noting his absence from society events and preference for scholarly pursuits over the gaming halls and clubs frequented by his elder brother. "And what question should I ask, Your Highness?" she ventured. "Henry," he corrected. "At least here, among the flowers, where no one is listening." "I could never be so informal," Zephyra replied, shocked at the suggestion. "Then you have already disappointed me," he said with a teasing smile. "But I shall persevere in my quest for honest conversation. What brings you to this particular section of the gardens, Miss Osborne?" Zephyra hesitated, then decided honesty would serve her best. "I am cataloguing the spring blooms for my father. He wishes to create a comprehensive record of all plants in the royal gardens." "A worthy endeavor," the prince nodded. "Though I suspect there's more to your interest than filial duty." She blinked in surprise. "How did you? The way you rendered those bluebells suggests genuine appreciation, not mere documentation." He gestured toward her journal. "May I?" Reluctantly, Zephyra handed over her journal, suddenly conscious of the worn binding and water-stained pages. Prince Henry handled it with unexpected care, turning the pages slowly, examining each sketch with genuine interest. You have a remarkable eye for detail, he commented, pausing at a drawing of a particularly intricate orchid. This Cypripedium calceolus, lady's slipper orchid, is rendered beautifully. You know its Latin name. Zephyra couldn't hide her surprise. Henry's lips quirked upward. Contrary to popular belief, not all princes spend their time hunting foxes and seducing débutantes. Some of us actually read books. I did not mean to imply. Of course you did, he interrupted, but without answer. And you're hardly the first. My own family considers my interest in botany rather peculiar. Before Zephyra could respond, the distant sound of voices approached. Henry's expression immediately shuttered, the openness vanishing as he returned her journal and rose to his feet. It seems my morning solitude is at an end, he said, his tone once again formal. Thank you for the pleasant conversation, Miss Osborne. With a slight bow, he strode away, disappearing behind a tall hedge just as a group of ladies in fashionable morning dresses rounded the corner. They passed Zephyra without a glance, their conversation centered on the upcoming Harrington ball. Zephyra remained on the bench, her heart beating unusually fast. Something about Prince Henry intrigued her, not his title or his handsome features, but the brief glimpse of loneliness she had seen in his eyes. Little did she know that this chance encounter would be the first of many, each drawing them into a dance as intricate and dangerous as any performed in London's grandest ballrooms. 1 week later, Zephyra found herself in a quiet corner of the palace greenhouse, carefully transferring a delicate fern into a larger pot. Early morning sunlight streamed through the glass panes, creating a warm, humid atmosphere that smelled of earth and green growing things. I had a feeling I might find you here, came a now familiar voice. Zephyra looked up to see Prince Henry standing in the doorway, dressed more casually than their previous meeting in riding breeches and a loose-fitting shirt, though his boots still gleamed with polish. Your Highness, she acknowledged with a small curtsy, conscious of the soil staining her apron and lightly smudged across her cheek. I did not expect to see you again. Yet here I am, he replied, approaching to examine her work. What are you repotting? Adiantum venustum, she answered automatically. Himalayan maidenhair fern. My father received it as a gift from an East India Company captain. Fascinating, Henry murmured, genuinely interested. The foliage is remarkably delicate. Unlike its nature, Zephyra found herself saying. Despite appearances, it's quite hardy when given proper care. Henry's eyes met hers, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Much like certain people I'm beginning to know. The unexpected compliment flustered Zephyra, and she busied herself with adding more soil to the pot. I am merely a gardener's daughter, Your Highness. And I am merely a spare heir, he countered. Second sons are rather like these ferns, decorative but ultimately superfluous unless the first specimen fails to thrive. The bitter edge to his words surprised her. Surely your position affords you certain freedoms your brother lacks. Henry considered this, leaning against the wooden work table. An astute observation. My brother's every move is scrutinized while I enjoy relative obscurity. Small comfort when one is raised to serve a purpose, only to discover that purpose is essentially to exist in case of catastrophe. Perhaps you might create your own purpose, Zephyra suggested, then immediately flushed at her presumption. Forgive me, it is not my place to, on the contrary, Henry interrupted, it is precisely such frank conversation I find myself craving. He studied her with those penetrating green eyes. Would you walk with me, Miss Osborne? The rose garden is particularly fine this morning. Propriety dictated she refuse, an unmarried woman alone with a prince would spark unimaginable gossip. Yet something in his expression, a vulnerability beneath the royal poise, compelled her to nod. I should remove my apron first, she said, untying the soiled garment. Leave it, he suggested with unexpected playfulness. It shall be our disguise. Anyone who sees us will assume I'm merely consulting with a gardener about important horticultural matters. Is that not precisely what you would be doing? Zephyra asked, raising an eyebrow. Henry laughed, the sound echoing through the greenhouse. Indeed. How convenient that the truth serves our purposes. As they walked among the roses, Zephyra was struck by the prince's extensive knowledge of the different varieties. He spoke of Rosa gallica and Rosa damascena with the familiarity of a dedicated botanist, occasionally stopping to examine a particularly fine bloom. "You truly do love plants," she observed as he bent to inhale the fragrance of a pale pink rose. "They ask nothing of me except water and care," he replied. "They don't care about my title, my connections, or my marriage prospects. Their beauty is unconditional." "Unlike the beauties of the tun," Zephyra said before she could stop herself. Henry's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Precisely. Though I'd advise against expressing such sentiments at all, Max." "There is little danger of that," she assured him. "I am unlikely to secure a voucher for those hallowed halls." "Their loss," Henry said quietly. "I find your conversation infinitely more stimulating than discussions of ribbons and reputations." A silence fell between them, comfortable yet charged with something Zephyra dared not name. They had reached a secluded arbor covered in climbing roses, the blooms creating a fragrant canopy above them. "My brother hosts a garden party next week," Henry said suddenly. "There will be a display of exotic plants from the colonies. Would you, that is, perhaps your father might require assistance cataloguing the specimens?" Zephyra understood the invitation hidden within his words. "I believe he would welcome such help, Your Highness." "Henry," he reminded her gently. "At least when we are alone." "That would be most improper," she protested, though without conviction. "More improper than walking unchaperoned with a prince in a secluded garden." His tone was teasing, but his eyes held a question. Before she could answer, voices approached, loud, aristocratic, unmistakably belonging to members of the court. Henry's expression changed instantly, the openness replaced by practiced neutrality. "The Althea rosea requires regular watering during the summer months," he said loudly, his tone businesslike. "See that it's attended to, Miss Osborne." Zephyra caught on immediately, bobbing a respectful curtsy. "Yes, Your Highness. Daily watering, as you command." A moment later, two elegantly dressed gentlemen rounded the corner, stopping short at the sight of the prince. "Henry!" "There you are," exclaimed the taller of the two, a golden-haired man with aristocratic features. "We've been searching everywhere. Your brother requires your presence for the diplomatic reception preparations." "Lord Hastings," Henry acknowledged with a nod. "And Lord Pembroke. I was just instructing the gardener's daughter on some matters concerning the hollyhocks." Lord Pembroke, a thin man with a perpetual expression of mild distaste, barely glanced at Zephyra. "Hollyhocks? Really, Your Highness, such matters are hardly worthy of royal attention." "On the contrary," Henry replied coolly. "Beauty in all forms deserves appreciation." Something in his tone caused Lord Hastings to look more closely at Zephyra, his eyes narrowing speculatively. "Indeed," he murmured. "Though some beauty blooms in unexpected places." Zephyra kept her eyes downcast, playing the role of deferential servant, but she could feel Lord Hastings' evaluating gaze. "I'll join my brother momentarily," Henry said, his voice taking on an edge of command. "Miss Osborne, you may continue your duties." With a final curtsy, Zephyra retreated, feeling Lord Hastings' eyes following her departure. Only when she reached the safety of the greenhouse did she release the breath she'd been holding, her hands trembling slightly as she removed her apron. That evening, as she helped her father record the day's plantings, a palace footman delivered a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside, she found a book of botanical illustrations and a note written in an elegant hand, "For your collection. The artist captures detail much as you do, with both precision and feeling. H." Zephyra traced her fingers over the signature, a simple letter rather than a royal seal. What game was the prince playing? And more importantly, why did her heart beat faster at the thought of seeing him again? The royal garden party arrived with perfect weather, sunshine tempered by a gentle breeze that stirred the ladies' ribbons and cooled flushed cheeks. Zephyra moved among the exotic plant displays with her father, clipboard in hand, recording names and conditions while trying to remain as inconspicuous as possible. The Strelitzia reginae is particularly fine, her father remarked, admiring the vibrant orange and blue bird of paradise flowers. His Majesty will be pleased. Indeed, Zephyra agreed, making a notation. Though I worry about its winter hardiness in our climate. We shall keep it in the orangery, Mr. Osborne decided. Now, I must speak with Lord Q about the orchid shipment. Continue cataloguing the tropical specimens, if you would. As her father moved away, Zephyra became acutely aware of being alone amid the swirl of aristocracy. Ladies in diaphanous gowns of palest muslin strolled arm in arm with gentlemen in perfectly tailored coats. Laughter tinkled like wind chimes, conversation flowing as freely as the champagne being served by liveried footmen. She had dressed with particular care today in her best gown of sprigged muslin, a pale blue ribbon threaded through her simply arranged hair. Still, among the diamonds and pearls glittering in the sunshine, she felt as plain as the gardener's tools hidden discreetly behind the display tents. Magnificent, is it not? Came a silky voice at her elbow. Zephyra turned to find Lord Hastings regarding her with undisguised interest. Up close, she could see that his golden good looks were marred by a certain hardness around his mouth. The bird of paradise is indeed spectacular, my lord, she replied carefully. I wasn't referring to the flower, he said, his eyes making an insolent journey from her face to her modest neckline. Zephyra stiffened. If you'll excuse me, my lord, I must complete my father's inventory. As she attempted to step around him, Lord Hastings moved to block her path. Such haste, he murmured. One might think you're avoiding me, Miss Osborne, she supplied reluctantly. My father is the royal gardener. Ah, yes. The girl with the hollyhocks. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Henry has always had a fondness for botanical pursuits. The way he emphasized the words made her flush with indignation. His Highness has a scholarly interest in horticulture, my lord. Is that what they're calling it these days? Lord Hastings chuckled. Come now, we're both worldly enough to recognize when a man takes an interest in more than a woman's knowledge of Latin plant names. You presume too much, Zephyra said, her voice low but firm. Do I? He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. A prince may dally with a gardener's daughter, but he marries a duchess. Remember that before you nurture any improper hopes. Before Zephyra could respond, a cool voice interrupted them. Hastings. I believe Lady Jersey was looking for you. Prince Henry stood a few paces away, his expression pleasant but his eyes cold. Something about a promised waltz. Lord Hastings straightened, a flash of something like resentment crossing his features before he composed himself into a respectful bow. Your Highness. Always appearing at the most opportune moments. A royal prerogative, Henry replied evenly. Miss Osborne, I believe my mother wished to consult you about the arrangement for the diplomatic dinner. If you would accompany me. Grateful for the rescue, Zephyra curtsied to Lord Hastings and followed the prince through the crowd. Only when they had reached a quieter section of the garden did Henry slow his pace, his expression darkening. What did Hastings say to you? He demanded. Nothing worth repeating, Zephyra replied, still rattled by the encounter. Henry stopped walking and turned to face her, concern evident in his eyes. He has a reputation for pursuing women he finds interesting. Did he make unwelcome advances? He merely reminded me of my place, Zephyra said, attempting a lightness she didn't feel. Something I would do well to remember. The prince's jaw tightened. Your place is wherever you choose it to be. If only that were true, she sighed. But we both know the world doesn't operate on such egalitarian principles. They had reached a small stone bench partially hidden by a weeping willow, its trailing branches creating a curtain of green. Henry gestured for her to sit. The Queen doesn't actually wish to see me, does she? Zephyra asked, suddenly realizing the pretext of their escape. No, Henry admitted, joining her on the bench. Though she would likely appreciate your insight on floral arrangements more than those of her appointed decorators. The woman insisted on placing lilies next to the dining settings. The fragrance would overwhelm the food entirely. Despite herself, Zephyra smiled. A botanical faux pas of the highest order. Precisely, Henry agreed, his own tension seeming to ease. Now, tell me truthfully, did Hastings upset you? Zephyra hesitated, then decided honesty was the only appropriate response. He implied that your interest in me was less than honorable. Did he indeed? Henry's voice was dangerously soft. And what did you conclude about my intentions? I don't know, she admitted. I cannot fathom why a prince would seek the company of someone like me unless, he prompted when she fell silent. Zephyra met his gaze directly. Unless you view me as a novel diversion. A simple girl unschooled in the artifice of court. A botanical curiosity to be studied and ultimately classified in your collection of experiences. Henry flinched as if she had struck him. Is that truly what you think of me? I don't know what to think, she confessed. I know only that friendships between people of our stations invariably end in pain for the lower party. Perhaps I don't seek friendship, Henry said quietly. The implications of his words hung in the air between them. Zephyra's heart beat so loudly she was certain he must hear it. That would be even more dangerous, she whispered. Henry leaned forward, his gaze intense. Zephyra, there you are, brother. The booming voice shattered the moment like a stone thrown through glass. Hiding from your duties again, I see. Prince Reginald, heir to the throne and Henry's elder brother by 3 years, emerged from behind the willow's curtain. Tall and broad-shouldered, he possessed the same green eyes as Henry but with none of the thoughtfulness. His handsome features were arranged in a perpetual expression of jovial entitlement. Reginald, Henry acknowledged, rising from the bench. I was just discussing the botanical displays with Miss Osborne. Were you indeed? Reginald's gaze raked over Zephyra with undisguised appreciation. I can see why botany suddenly holds such appeal. Zephyra stood and curtsied deeply. Your Highness. Miss Osborne is the daughter of our new head gardener, Henry explained, his voice notably cooler. She has extensive knowledge of plant species. How fascinating, Reginald replied, clearly not interested in her horticultural expertise. Perhaps she could give me a private tour of the greenhouses sometime. I'm sure Miss Osborne's duties keep her quite occupied, Henry said firmly. Something in his tone made Reginald look more closely at his brother, a slow smile spreading across his face. Well, well. The solitary prince finally showing interest in something besides his books. Father will be delighted. Miss Osborne was just returning to her father, Henry said, ignoring his brother's insinuation. We've kept her from her duties long enough. Recognizing the dismissal, Zephyra curtsied again. Your Highnesses. If you'll excuse me. As she walked away, she heard Reginald's loud whisper, a bit beneath your touch, isn't she? Though I suppose for a dalliance, enough, Henry cut him off sharply. Show some respect. Reginald's laughter followed Zephyra down the path, each note a painful reminder of the impossibility of whatever was growing between her and Prince Henry. That evening, a palace messenger delivered another package to the gardener's cottage. Inside, Zephyra found a small pot containing a rare blue orchid and a note, some beauty defies classification. H. She pressed the note between the pages of her journal, beside the sketch she had made of the prince when he wasn't looking. Summer unfurled across London like a luxurious carpet. The ton engaged in their seasonal ritual of balls, musicales, picnics, and promenades, while Zephyra's world remained centered on the palace gardens. Yet increasingly, her paths crossed with Prince Henry's, sometimes by apparent chance, other times through thinly veiled arrangements. They established a routine of early morning walks through the Rose Garden, discussing everything from politics to poetry, botany to philosophy. Henry brought her books from his private library, Zephyra shared the folk knowledge of plants passed down from her mother. Foxglove for heart ailments, she explained one dewy morning, pointing to the tall purple spires. Though the dosage must be precise, too little has no effect, too much can kill. Rather like love, Henry mused. Zephyra glanced at him sharply. I wouldn't know. No? His voice was gentle. I find that difficult to believe. She busied herself with examining a leaf. My experience is limited to novels and observation, Your Highness. Henry, he corrected for what must have been the 100th time. After 2 months of almost daily conversation, surely we've progressed beyond titles. Zephyra sighed, relenting. Henry, then. But only when we are alone. A concession at last, he exclaimed with mock triumph. I shall mark this day in my diary. Do princes keep diaries? She asked, genuinely curious. This one does, Henry admitted. Though its contents would scandalize the court. Revolutionary politics and scientific heresies. Worse, he said, his eyes twinkling. Pressed flowers and sketches of a certain gardener's daughter. Zephyra's breath caught. You shouldn't say such things. Why not? They're true. Truth is often the most dangerous thing to speak aloud, she replied, thinking of the whispers that had begun to circulate among the palace staff. Henry frowned. Has someone been unkind to you because of our friendship? She hesitated. The sidelong glances from other servants, the suddenly withdrawn invitations to tea with the housekeeper, the cutting remarks from Lady Hastings' lady's maid, all suggested that her association with the prince had not gone unnoticed. People talk, she said simply. It is the way of the world. Let them talk, Henry said fiercely. What harm can words do? Words shape reputations, and reputations determine futures, Zephyra replied. Particularly for women without rank or fortune to shield them. Henry stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Is your reputation suffering because of me? The genuine distress in his voice touched her. It is nothing I cannot weather, she assured him. But perhaps we should be more circumspect. Or perhaps, he said slowly, we should give them something real to talk about. Before she could question his meaning, Henry reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. I had this made for you. Curious despite her better judgment, Zephyra accepted the pouch and carefully emptied its contents into her palm. A silver pendant in the shape of a perfect bird of paradise flower gleamed in the morning light, suspended on a delicate chain. It's beautiful, she breathed, touching the detailed petals with a fingertip. Like its namesake, Henry said softly. Rare and exotic and utterly captivating. Zephyra closed her fingers around the pendant, feeling the metal warm against her skin. I cannot accept this. Why not? You know why, she said, her voice barely audible. Gifts like this between people of our stations imply expectations. Henry's expression grew serious. What if I have expectations? The world seemed to still around them, even the birdsong fading to insignificance. Zephyra felt dizzy with possibility and terror. What kind of expectations could a prince possibly have of a gardener's daughter, she asked, forcing herself to meet his gaze. The kind that keep me awake at night, Henry admitted. The kind that make me question everything I've been taught about duty and position. He took a step closer. The kind that make me wonder what your lips would taste like if I kissed you right now. Zephyra's heart thundered in her chest. Henry, the sharp clearing of a throat behind them shattered the moment. They turned to find Lord Hastings standing a few yards away, an unpleasant smile playing about his lips. Forgive the intrusion, Your Highness, he said with a bow that somehow managed to be both proper and insolent. The Queen has requested your presence. Something about the arrangements for Princess Amelia's birthday celebration. Henry straightened, his expression closing like a book. Of course. Please inform Her Majesty I shall attend her shortly. Lord Hastings' gaze drifted to the pendant still clutched in Zephyra's hand, and his smile widened. Shall I mention you were botanizing, Your Highness? You may mention whatever you wish, Henry replied coldly. Though I recommend discretion, lest others begin to question your own private pursuits. A flush of anger touched Lord Hastings' cheeks, but he merely bowed again. As you wish, Your Highness. Once he had departed, Henry turned back to Zephyra with a frustrated sigh. I must go. She nodded, attempting to return the pendant. You should take this. Keep it, he insisted, closing her fingers around it. Whether you wear it or not is your choice, but I want you to have it. It will only fuel gossip, she protested weakly. Henry's expression softened. Let me worry about that. He hesitated, then quickly raised her hand to his lips. Until tomorrow. As he strode away, Zephyra stood frozen, her skin tingling where his mouth had touched. After a moment's deliberation, she fastened the necklace around her throat, tucking the pendant beneath her modest neckline where it rested, cool and secret, against her heart. What she didn't see was Lord Hastings watching from a distance, a calculating expression on his handsome face. The ball at Hartley House marked the pinnacle of the London season. Every member of the ton who mattered, and many who desperately wished to matter, crowded the ornate ballroom, a kaleidoscope of silks, jewels, and ambition swirling beneath crystal chandeliers. Zephyra stood in a shadowed alcove near the refreshment table, technically present as part of her father's team decorating the hall with elaborate floral arrangements, but actually there at Henry's secret invitation. Dressed in her finest gown, a modest creation of pale green silk borrowed from her cousin who worked as a lady's maid, she felt simultaneously invisible and conspicuous. You came, Henry's voice startled her from her thoughts. He looked resplendent in formal court attire, his broad shoulders accentuated by the precisely tailored dark blue coat, a silver sash across his chest indicating his royal status. I shouldn't have, Zephyra replied, though she couldn't suppress a smile at the delight in his eyes. This is madness. The best kind, he agreed, offering his arm. Will you walk with me to the terrace? The orchids you suggested for the balustrades look magnificent in the moonlight. Hesitantly, she placed her gloved hand on his arm. People will notice. Let them, Henry said, guiding her toward the French doors that opened onto a wide terrace. Besides, most of them are too foxed on champagne to notice much beyond their own reflections. Outside, the summer night enveloped them in warm darkness punctuated by strategically placed lanterns. True to Henry's word, orchids in shades of cream and pale purple cascaded from decorative urns along the balustrade, their exotic shapes creating graceful silhouettes against the stone. Beautiful, Zephyra murmured, momentarily forgetting her anxiety as she admired the floral display. I was just thinking the same, Henry replied, though his eyes were fixed on her profile. She felt his gaze and turned to face him, suddenly aware of how secluded this corner of the terrace was, hidden from the ballroom by a large potted palm. Henry, why did you ask me to come tonight? Truly? Because I wanted to see you in the setting where I am usually most miserable, he admitted. To see if your presence could transform even this gilded cage into somewhere I might find joy. And has it? She asked softly. Beyond measure. He took her hands in his. Zephyra, these past months have been the happiest of my life. When I'm with you, I'm not the spare prince, the royal backup plan. I'm just a man who loves plants and books and, he stopped abruptly, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. And, she prompted, barely breathing. And you, he finished simply. I love you, Zephyra Osborne. The world seemed to still around them, the music from the ballroom fading to a distant hum. Zephyra felt as though she were standing on the edge of a precipice, terrified to step forward yet unable to step back. You cannot, she whispered. You are a prince. I am, the woman who sees me, Henry interrupted. Not the title, not the uniform, not the royal duty. Me. Before she could respond, he leaned forward and kissed her. His lips were gentle yet insistent, conveying months of restrained longing. Despite every warning bell clanging in her mind, Zephyra found herself responding, her hands moving to his shoulders as she rose on tiptoe to better meet his embrace. The kiss deepened, his arms encircling her waist, drawing her closer. For one perfect moment, the impossibility of their situation vanished, leaving only the reality of his touch, his scent, the beating of his heart against hers. A woman's shocked gasp shattered their privacy. They broke apart to find Lady Harrington, one of London's most notorious gossips, staring at them with undisguised scandal and delight. Behind her stood her daughter, Penelope, whose own hopes regarding Prince Henry were well known throughout society. Your Highness, Lady Harrington managed, her eyes darting between the prince and Zephyra with calculating intensity. I was just coming for some air with dear Penelope. Henry straightened, instinctively stepping slightly in front of Zephyra. Lady Harrington. Miss Harrington. A pleasant evening, is it not? Indeed, Lady Harrington replied, her gaze now fixed firmly on Zephyra. Though I don't believe I've had the pleasure of meeting your companion. The hesitation before the final word contained volumes of insinuation. Zephyra felt her face flush with humiliation. Miss Osborne was consulting with me about the floral arrangements, Henry said smoothly. Her father is the royal gardener. How interesting, Lady Harrington drawled. I had no idea botanical consultations had become so intimate. Penelope Harrington's eyes filled with tears, and she turned abruptly, fleeing back toward the ballroom. Her mother lingered a moment longer, her thin lips curved in a smile that promised nothing good. Your Highness, she curtsied with exaggerated formality. Miss Osborne. As she swept away, Zephyra felt the full weight of what had just occurred crash down upon her. Oh God, she whispered. By morning, every household in London will know. Henry's jaw was tight with anger, but his touch was gentle as he took her hands again. Let them talk. I won't let them hurt you. You can't stop this, Zephyra said, pulling away. Don't you understand? This isn't one of your romantic novels where love conquers all. You are the king's son. I am nobody. Not to me, Henry insisted. It doesn't matter. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes. The world doesn't care what we feel. It cares about bloodlines and alliances and property. You'll be married off to some German princess or English duchess, and I'll be lucky if my father isn't dismissed for allowing his daughter to behave inappropriately with a royal. Henry's expression hardened with determination. I won't let that happen. I'll speak to my father and tell him what. Zephyra interrupted. That you wish to marry a gardener's daughter? That you'll throw away centuries of royal tradition for a woman who can name plants in Latin but knows nothing of politics or diplomacy? She shook her head sadly. He would sooner send you to the colonies. Then perhaps that's where we should go, Henry said, a new intensity in his voice. To India, or the Americas. Somewhere we could start fresh, without the weight of crowns and titles. For one wild moment, Zephyra allowed herself to imagine it, a cottage somewhere warm and green, filled with books and plants and children with Henry's green eyes. Then reality reasserted itself, cold and immutable. You would be miserable, she said softly. Stripped of your position, your family, your country. And eventually, you would resent me for it. Never, he insisted. Zephyra stepped back, putting physical distance between them, though it felt like tearing her own heart in two. I should go. Lady Harrington has probably already spread the news throughout the ballroom. Zephyra, please, goodbye, Henry, she whispered, turning to flee before he could see her tears fall. She ran through the garden, avoiding the main paths where guests strolled, her borrowed finery catching on bushes and branches. By the time she reached the servants' entrance where her father waited with their cart, her dress was torn and muddied, her carefully arranged hair falling in disarray around her shoulders. Mr. Osborne took one look at his daughter's face and asked no questions, simply helping her into the cart and covering her with his coat. As they rattled away from Hartley House, Zephyra clutched the silver bird of paradise pendant at her throat and wept silently for dreams that could never be. The scandal erupted precisely as Zephyra had feared. Within days, whispers of the prince's gardener girl echoed through drawing rooms and servants' halls alike. Lord Hastings, seeing an opportunity to curry favour with the king, embellished his account of finding the prince and Zephyra in intimate conversation, implying a long-standing liaison of a most improper nature. Mr. Osborne was summoned to explain his daughter's behaviour. Though he returned home still employed, his face was grim. The king was merciful, he told Zephyra that evening. Out of respect for my service, he has not dismissed me. But you are no longer permitted on palace grounds. Zephyra nodded numbly. She had expected as much. And Prince Henry. Her father's expression softened. Confined to the palace, from what I hear. There are rumors he's to be sent on a diplomatic mission to Prussia, with discussions of a potential match to a duke's daughter there. The pain that lanced through Zephyra's heart was physical in its intensity. "It's for the best," she managed. "Is it?" her father asked quietly. "I've never seen you as happy as these past months." "Happiness built on impossible dreams is no foundation for a life," she replied, attempting practicality though her voice wavered. That night, she carefully packed away the botanical books Henry had given her, the pressed flowers they had collected together, the sketches she had made of him laughing in the sunshine. Last, with trembling fingers, she removed the silver pendant from her neck and placed it in a small wooden box, tucking it beneath her folded winter shawls where she wouldn't have to see it daily. Life, she decided, would continue. She would help her father, pursue her botanical illustrations, perhaps eventually marry some respectable tradesman who wouldn't mind a wife with a slightly tarnished reputation. The pain would dull with time. It must. 3 weeks passed without word from Henry. Zephyra threw herself into helping her cousin establish a small flower shop in Covent Garden, arranging displays and creating botanical cards to accompany the bouquets. If customers occasionally whispered and pointed when they recognized her from the gossip sheets, she pretended not to notice. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, the shop bell jingled to announce a customer. Zephyra, arranging lilies in the back room, called out, "One moment, please." When she emerged, wiping her hands on her apron, she froze. There, dripping rainwater onto the wooden floor, stood Prince Henry, or rather, a much-altered version of the man she knew. Gone was the immaculate royal attire, replaced by a simple coat of good but understated quality. His hair was longer, curling slightly at the collar, and a hint of stubble shadowed his jaw. "Henry," she whispered, hardly believing her eyes. "Hello, Zephyra," he replied, his voice warm despite his bedraggled appearance. "Your cousin said I might find you here." "What are you doing?" "You can't be seen here," she hissed, glancing anxiously toward the window. "If someone recognizes you, they won't," he assured her. Few people look closely at a man of no particular distinction. And even fewer would expect to find a prince in a flower shop in Covent Garden. Zephyra shook her head in disbelief. "You shouldn't have come." "Your father knows nothing of this visit," Henry finished. "He believes I'm dutifully considering the Prussian marriage proposal while confined to my rooms." A mischievous smile touched his lips. "Fortunately, I discovered years ago that the palace has numerous unguarded exits if one knows where to look." Despite herself, Zephyra felt an answering smile tug at her mouth. "You always were unconventional." A diplomatic way of saying the stubborn, he observed, then grew serious. "I had to see you, Zephyra. These weeks without you have been unbearable." "For me as well," she admitted softly. "But nothing has changed. The situation remains impossible." "Does it?" Henry stepped closer, water still dripping from his greatcoat. "What if I told you I've found a solution?" Hope, dangerous, fragile hope, flickered in Zephyra's chest. "What kind of solution?" "I've spoken to my godfather, the Duke of Mansfield," Henry explained. "He owns extensive properties in Scotland, including a botanical research station on his estate. They're in need of a director, someone with extensive knowledge of plants and excellent artistic skills for documentation." Zephyra's breath caught. "And you suggested me?" "Us," Henry corrected. "The position comes with a cottage on the estate grounds. Modest but comfortable. Far from London society and court politics. But you're still a prince," Zephyra pointed out. "You can't simply disappear to Scotland." "Not permanently, no," Henry acknowledged. "But as the second son, I'm entitled to pursue certain scholarly interests. Botanical research has always been my passion. My father actually seemed relieved when I proposed focusing my energies in that direction rather than continuing to embarrass the family in London." Zephyra's mind raced, trying to find the flaw in his plan. "And what of marriage? Surely your father still expects you to make an advantageous match." Henry's expression grew determined. "I've negotiated a compromise. In exchange for abandoning any claim to succession, which I gladly relinquish to my brother and his future heirs, I'm permitted to marry where I choose, provided the union doesn't bring scandal to the crown." But I've already brought scandal, Zephyra reminded him. Temporary gossip, Henry dismissed. Which will fade entirely once we're quietly married by special license and established respectably in Scotland. By next season, London will have found new subjects for its malicious tongue. Zephyra's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. You're proposing marriage? Henry smiled, suddenly seeming boyishly uncertain despite his grand plans. I had intended something more romantic, perhaps beneath that weeping willow where we first spoke honestly. But yes, Zephyra Osborne, I am asking you to be my wife. He took her hands in his. Not a princess, not a duchess, just the wife of a botanist who happens to be the king's second son. A life of books and plants and quiet happiness, with occasional tedious royal obligations when absolutely necessary. Tears blurred Zephyra's vision. You would give up court life for me? Court life is what I've always longed to escape, Henry said fervently. You're simply my perfect excuse. His expression grew tender. And the woman I love beyond reason or propriety. For a moment, Zephyra stood silent, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he offered. Then, with sudden clarity, she knew her answer, had perhaps always known it from that first morning among the bluebells. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, Henry. I will marry you. Joy illuminated his face as he gathered her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that sent a display of daisies crashing to the floor. Neither of them noticed or cared as their lips met in a kiss that tasted of rain and promises and impossible dreams suddenly within reach. When they finally parted, breathless and laughing, Henry reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I believe this belongs with you, he said, opening it to reveal the silver bird of paradise pendant. A rare and beautiful thing that defies ordinary classification, much like the woman who captured my heart in a palace garden. As he fastened the necklace around her throat, Zephyra realized that sometimes, very rarely, life could indeed unfold like the romantic novels she had never quite allowed herself to believe. You know, she said, fingering the pendant with a mischievous smile, I believe there's a species of Scottish heather that hasn't been properly classified yet. It might take years of careful study. What a fortunate coincidence, Henry replied, drawing her close again. I happen to have years to give you. Outside, the rain began to ease, sunlight breaking through the clouds to cast dappled patterns across the flower shop floor, rather like, Zephyra thought, the shifting shadows in a palace garden where an unlikely love had first taken root and, against all odds, found the perfect conditions to bloom.